Car Convos, a Drill Team Dynamics deep dive. This is the podcast that was asked for, here we are to deliver. Here's the situation. Let me paint the picture for anyone that's listening, right? And anyone who has come with and TA'd on a DTD function before knows exactly what this situation is. You're staffed to teach something with us, and it just so happens that Kirsten and Cheeto and myself are on that function together as well. And we're staying a little bit farther away from the school, so let's say we have 45 minutes or an hour to drive to get there. And if you've been anywhere with us, you know that the ride is going to go one of two ways. We're going to sit in absolute silence and just chill because there's, a long day. It's been a long day, whatever. We're tired. Or we're going to talk, and it's going to be like whatever's on our minds. We're just going to kind of explore it and go through it because that's part of our process and how we think about, improving our teaching and improving, our little corner of the activity. And I think generally speaking, there are a couple kinds of people there. People sit and look out the window, take in what they're hearing, and all is well. Some people listen. If you want to talk, we don't want them to talk, but if you have to hear what you have to say, and they vibe the entire time. This situation, this podcast, is us riding in a car for 45 to 60 minutes, talking about a thing that's important to what it is that we do and what it is that we all love to do, which is help people with Drill Team. And we're going to start this series. I think the conversation got going, right, of like, we're all out teaching at different schools, and we're like, wait a second, I think that underneath everything we decide to do, there are these assumptions, these things that we believe to be true through a combination of our experiences and observations and, what we've been through and what we've seen. There are things that are true. There are assumptions about the activity or about the cadets or about, whatever. And these assumptions are so fundamental to what we do that we don't talk about them. And every decision that we make comes based on these assumptions that we believe, and we've just never sat down and kind of unpacked them or talked through them. And that's what we're going to do. Every time we do this, we're going to take another assumption. We're going to talk about what it is and what it means to us and why do we believe this particular foundational statement. And then we're going to talk about what it means for us practically as people who teach other people's children about Drill Team. So with that being said, the first one, and we asked our folks to vote on what they thought would be most interesting, and more people chose the assumption that we believe, Drill Team Dynamics, Kirsten, Cheeto, Matt, we all believe at the end of the day that children, cadets, whatever you want to call them, are critically thinking, problem solving, intelligent. They're capable of being free thinking and creative and critically thinking human beings. And that's probably the biggest assumption, I think, that we all kind of operate under, is that at the end of the day, every student that we encounter is absolutely capable of being intelligent and doing great things and achieving at a high level. And I think that it sometimes goes without saying, but it might need to be said, that this is the start of everything that we do and all the decisions that we make and all the things that we do as an organization, is because we believe that the kids are great, the students are wonderful, and they are capable of doing amazing things. So that's the assumption. And then what we're going to talk about is so what does that actually mean? Why do we think that? What in our lives has brought that to the forefront or made it so important to us? And then we're going to unpack what we do about that. So I guess let's just start with the first thing, which is like, when we say that all children are totally capable and free thinking and wonderful and intelligent, what does that mean to us? Like in our own words, from our own experiences, what have we seen? What have we noticed? Where does that come from?
You want to pick one question out of those?
I think let's go with what does it mean to us? Like what does that mean when we talk about it?
I think for my mental space, when I think about, cadets being able to actually think for themselves, it means that the base assumption for things is that I don't have to physically make them do anything. I can give them the freedom to kind of figure it out as I explain something. And so if they are confused, because they are thinking individuals, they will just tell me they are confused if I didn't make it clear enough. And I don't have to just keep physically manipulating them to get to wherever I want them to go. Because I think that's the base level that a lot of us start off with is, and it's the easiest thing to do. Like, I want to tell you something, I want to get you to do something. So if I can't explain it well enough, or I can't explain it in the way that you could process it, well, the important part is not giving you the time to figure out what I said. It's about moving you to wherever I want you so that we can get to the more important bit of knowledge or practice I want to accomplish. And so I think one of the base levels for how I teach, for watching y'all teach, is that we do the opposite of that in a lot of the information like providing time. We leave the space because we believe they will figure it out. And if they don't, they will just tell us they didn't figure it out. And then it's our job to clarify in a different way or a better way to get them where they're going.
And I think, because you said basically physically manipulate in terms of like moving them versus giving them the space to move themselves. Because I think likewise, I think a lot of adults assume they also need to mentally or emotionally manipulate students to like create this like kiddie world of assumptions for the students that like will make them create the result. Whereas I think a lot of what we do is speak to the reality of what the activity is, what's expected of them, maybe some of the weird dynamics that are happening on the adult side, and then giving them the information to actually know what's going on and then make actual real and good decisions about what it is that they're doing.
Yeah, when I think about this, I think about like, I think there's adult level communication that happens between adults that's not appropriate for students to be a part of, right? And then there's a manner of communicating between adults which is understood, which is that we as adults don't want to be spoken down to. And we as adults know when somebody across the table thinks we're stupid or thinks we're incapable or thinks that we're, not intelligent enough to process what they're saying, and we know how that feels. I think for me, when I think about this, it's like you deliver information to a student at the student's level, but you try to deliver it in a way that affirms their general existence in a way that you would want to have that information given. So like how you communicate and the words you choose and the way that you speak to them, and kids can tell what you think about them.
I just mean in the manner of like a lot of times we've gone places and the way that they'll motivate the students or get them pumped is to pit them against another school and make up these things about, oh, this other school is talking mess and they want to beat you here, there. Whereas we can just talk to them about, hey, here's what's really happening at a competition. Here are the things that people are looking for. Here, here's what you need to accomplish. And by giving them the actual reality of what's happening is they're able to then take that and do something real with the information.
Well, and I think that at the end of the day, you do know when adults are doing that to you when you're a student. And the problem is, yeah, sometimes, because the worst case scenario is when you have a student that doesn't realize that and that they're being kept in this holding pool of being a small child when you might not tell them all the dynamics that are happening between the schools, the political and, nature of the instructors.
But you don't give them information of like, hey, here's our AAR, so let's look at how you did. By the way, you did bad because of all these things. You didn't win because you got gypped. They cheated. Whatever things. Whereas when we approach students is we can look at the one we do know enough about the scores that we can look and say, hey, here's where the scores broke out. Here's what you did that caused this that you can adjust. Is we're not trying to basically spare their feelings if they didn't do well. Is we're able to give them actual information in a way that's not putting them down, but where they can look at it good or bad and then again make decisions about it.
And I think adults really, especially in the sphere that we're in with the military and junior ROTC, I think adults sometimes are confused or they're challenged because they don't know how real they can be. Because if you're too real and you hurt people's feelings, well, that's not okay in 2023. But if you sugarcoat things too much and then you're enabling, entitled behavior. And there is this line where, like, you know what? They're intelligent enough to hear the truth delivered in a tactful, professional manner. So I think the manner of speaking to the students is what sticks out to me, is like, You can tell a student things at their level, but you can tell them it in a way that will communicate to them that they do have the processing power to figure out what you mean.
Well, I think we've seen that the students respond really well when you speak to them like people and not like
versus
I'm
like
an adult
actual
here.
children.
Correct.
Mhm,
Because I think they
mhm.
respond really well and are capable of being spoken to like human beings who just have less life experience and therefore may need more guidance on some things like more than others.
Well, you
Yeah.
hear people talk about like, oh, well, your feelings, they minimize teenage feelings and they minimize, kid feelings as if those feelings weren't equally as powerful as adult feelings. They're just feelings that maybe don't have the context of a breadth of life experience yet. But that doesn't make them less real.
It also comes down to, because we see this all the time with different kind of instruction methods and how things kind of flow out through the entire progression. But a lot of people, both parents and instructors, they will look at the cadets at the end of a workshop and be like, wow, I didn't know you could do those things. And it's because I think we spend so much time as adults assuming that when given proper information, and because not just information, but the space to actually think and process that information, because we do all process that information differently. When you're given the chance to do that, the cadets will make the choices. And we just kind of, a lot of the world is moving at such a fast pace that we rush children through all of this decision making process. And then when they're 18, the answer is, well, why don't you know how to choose things? Why are you rushing? Well, their entire life has been rushing them. And I think when instructors and when parents see the space that their child is given, and then that this space results in a really competent and thinking person, they're almost always shocked. And yet I find we are not, because that's the entire purpose, is we inherently just believe that given the time and the space, the cadets will make the choices you want them to make once they're given the right information in order to see why they should make that choice. Because also, a lot of times we just assume we should tell you something, and because I am older than you, you should inherently trust that whatever I say is absolutely correct, and if you don't immediately jump when I say jump, you're the problem. Not
Yeah,
maybe that you don't know me.
yeah, it is the whole like I think a lot of, and I think it's when you're young in the game, you walk into a situation sometimes. I know I was like this, and it's like, well, I'm the guy that has the drill experience. I've climbed to the top of the mountain, and I can spin the rifle really well, and you become offended, right, when you
Yes.
don't get that buy-in from the students,
Yep.
because I think at the end of the day, there's something in you that says, well, they're not intelligent enough. And this was for me, it was like, well, why wouldn't you trust me? I'm clearly more experienced. That should be so obvious. When you're right, it really comes back down to how are you treating them, and are you affirming what they already know and what they're already capable of?
Well, and I think maybe this goes to the question of maybe why, and maybe okay. So going back to like when, because Cheeto and I were in high school together, we graduated together. You know, I felt like our senior year, and having talked to you about like kind of your senior year, Matt, is like I felt like we were generally very competent as high schoolers.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
And so I know, when we started Joel Team Dynamics, is we really didn't go into the adult world completely because we pretty much started training from the moment we graduated. And so I think initially when we started teaching people is we were pretty much teaching people who would have been our peers to begin with. And so
Yep.
one is the relationship was never just I went away into the adult world and then came back into the student world. Is I pretty much we've never really super left it on our part because we started teaching pretty much right out of high school. And
That's true. I
then
never really thought about that.
the other thing is none of the three of us have had children. And so we also never had to do the thing of like, we have to make decisions for them from the time they're like toddlers, like babies.
I do think that's an interesting in terms of like, in terms of looking at a student, because I likewise have never left the activity from the standpoint of when I graduated, I was still involved in some way. And I think that when you can relate and you remember and you are still connected to what it felt like to be 17 years old, I think it's one of those things where if you can remember how that felt, and if you can remember how it felt when your parents or your teachers or your administrators didn't trust you, or they didn't think that you were capable in some way, I think we all have that experience. And it's just remembering that, like, how did that feel to me? And I don't want to thrust that upon somebody else.
Right, which is why I think for us, maybe our view is a little bit unique because, like, most people who start teaching have to go to college for that time and then they enter back in 4 years later, right, when they're doing their student teaching. But, like, we have all been teaching pretty much from the moment we graduated. So we never really had that separation. And so I think we're able to then keep in mind of, like, what was the space that I wanted? What was I able to do when I had the space? What was I able to do when the adults around me gave me the space to do that? And then I think then going into other is when we see that that space isn't theirs. I think we've always been trying to create the space to let the students breathe because we personally, I think, were successful as cadet leaders and we're able to do a lot because the adults in our lives gave us that space. For us, maybe it's a little bit of a unique assumption because one, we never really left high school in terms of forgetting about it. And two, again, I think part of the fact that we don't have kids and we haven't had to raise people from babies when they couldn't take care of themselves. So we've never had that perspective is we're getting these people from sometimes middle school, but like from the time they're 12 to 18. And so we're just making that assumption that they have the ability because we were able to do it.
Well, I think that transitions us kind of perfectly into, like, what are some tangible examples of this? Because I will tell you this, I don't know that I believe this as strongly that children are perfectly capable, they're intelligent, they're free thinking, they don't need their hands held nearly as much as we might believe that they do. I would not have believed it if I don't think if Kirsten never would have gone to Belichick. Because to me, and this and Adam's in here, and I know that he can relate too, having taught at the middle school level. Middle school is like, if you talk to teachers and you tell them you're a middle school teacher, they're like, well, bless your heart. Because there are only two kinds of people. There are people that love middle school, and there are people like, that's the absolute worst. And I think a lot of the times middle school students, because it's the worst age to be.
Because they're not elementary, middle, like they're not babies anymore.
You have ideas about
they're
things.
Not teenagers.
Yeah.
They're just hitting puberty, so like they're not like close enough to being adults that like they have those thought processes or
they can't. They have all these feelings, they don't have the processing power to work through it.
Yeah.
And to go to Belichick, and I think the most unique thing about Belichick that stands out to me was that the staff sergeant never. I mean, his whole thing was like, listen, they're capable and they'll figure it out. Those children at Belichick had no idea what was hard or not hard. They had no idea what was normal or not normal from the standpoint that it's not normal to drill with M1 Garands as a sixth grader because no one told them it was supposed to be hard. It was just expected of them that they show up and they work hard and that they were going to be able to do it if they put in the effort and they applied themselves.
Right. And then when some of those sixth graders went to like the drill camp over the summer and like we're in there with some people who were 17 and 18 they didn't get left behind. If anything, they were running circles around
they
kind
of ran the platoons that summer, and it was so funny because the seniors made space for them because I think the seniors recognized they're not only cute because they're so young and doing this thing,
but they're also talented.
They're talented and competent. And to me, I was like, well, if middle schoolers can do this, maybe my assumption about what high schoolers can and can't do is completely wrong. When instructors will come up and say, well, girls, they're not strong enough to do the arms. I have to tell them every time is like, I watched little Karina throw the M1 over her head, catch it one-handed on the floor in Daytona Beach, Florida. Don't tell me what a female cadet is capable of because your females at least have the extra years because they're in 11th grade and they're not in 6th grade. And so for me, that was a really powerful experience. And from that point on, it's really hard. You have these conversations and you listen to the adults talk. Oh, my team can't do this because of this, this, and this. And it's like, well, you said that. You said that.
Yes.
You put that limitation on them. Right? So
I do think that's a lot of it, though. Is instructors or adults or parents or heck, even older teammates, we often end up putting limitations on people even accidentally, like with the best of intentions, and then don't realize that limitation that we accidentally had in our head is the literal only thing stopping those cadets or those younger individuals from achieving the very thing we just never thought they might be capable of, because we didn't stop and just give the benefit of the doubt that maybe they can if they're just given the time and the space to do so.
Well, I think you watch movies, and it's like you watch all these movies about people doing amazing things they never thought they could do,
All
and
the
you
sports ball movies.
all the sports ball movies, and
Yes.
all the like unlikely heroes overcoming their hardships, and you think, well, that's not for our drill team, that's not for these cadets. You
Well,
know,
that's
that's
the
an
exception, not the rule. Yep.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Now, I will
Mhm.
say though, is if you look at all those movies, is when these people come in, these coaches or these like adults who come in to train, part of the thing that they have, and I think that maybe this is the struggle in our activity, is that they are usually experts at the activity. Either like even if they hadn't coached before, is they were like at the top of their game.
The
when they
Rock
were,
had played football, and now he's a corrections officer, and now he's the coach.
you know, in the Miracle on Ice, you know, had been on the Olympic team and just missed out, and like, so I think, but what you find though is those people are like basically masters in their content area, and I think when it's hard like for instructors and I think other adults who like they get in, they're like, yeah, I drilled 20 years ago when I did basic, like, so I think part of
never touched it again.
exactly. So I think the other thing that we have an advantage on is we, like for me, have been doing it since middle school, you know, Matt's going on 20 years in this. We don't really have to think about the content anymore. It's kind of just like breathing. It's just a part of what we do. So I think we also have a lot of space to think about the people and realize those things, whereas most other people are just trying to survive. Oh gosh, I'm here as an instructor. This is my first year. Oh, I have to have a drill team? Oh gosh. I don't know anything about this. These kids.
And if I don't know anything about this, these people that I took this job to help children, how could the children possibly be capable of knowing it when I don't even know it? And I feel like, you know, maybe I'm behind, therefore they must be further behind me. When the reality is if you give them the space and get them some resources and push them in the right direction, they will go home and research how to become great at it.
And well, so because they're so worried about content, is I don't even think most people get the chance to even think about the personnel side, or they're so like they are so overwhelmed that like it's all like they look at everything and just go, okay, I can't do this at all. Get away from me. You're not capable of doing this. I'm just going to micromanage everything. You shut up and go there. We're just going to do it my way because it's easier this way.
Well, because when and you do get some instructors who are enthusiastic and they like the activity. Maybe they were involved in it, or maybe that for something about it attracts them to want to be good at it. And then you wind up with the opposite problem, which is when the instructor happens to be on their own drill team. And when the instructor's on their own drill, when the instructor's the commander of their own drill team, you really see it come out that they maybe don't inherently believe that their students are capable because they feel the need to control every situation.
Well, but I think that's on the other side of the spectrum of they like it so much that what they like about the activity is the drill, and they like moving people around, and so what they found is a passion for drill themselves, and so therefore they don't give the students the space because they like doing it, and they would not know where they fit in their program if suddenly that they didn't have the like they weren't the ones now doing the thing.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue into like what is the practical outcome of believing the assumption that the kids are capable, that they are intelligent, that they will problem solve for themselves, that they are free thinking individuals. Where does this come out in like our actual teaching and coaching and consulting practice? How does this manifest itself in the decisions that we make? Like, I have a laundry list, but I'll save it. What are things that we can think of right off the top of our heads that are like, we do that because we believe the kids are capable of doing it?
I think initially when we first started it was a lot of info dumping of like, let's give them this information because we knew like this was some stuff that we figured out in high school, and so let's give you the information and then take you through the process so you can get in your body, but you are capable of learning the information and then replicating it. And so I think that to start with in the first probably 5 to 6, even recently, it's a lot of like just give them as much information as they possibly can.
The information is like,
it was about they are capable, but the only thing they don't have is the adult context of being able to look back at all of these other factors that you just literally cannot know unless you are told because your scope of view is limited. And so I think at first it came from a place of, well, they can do this because like we were able to do it when we got more information. So let's just give them everything we've got, because as soon as they have the information, they can take it and run with it.
But now I think, the longer we've been in this and the more that we've really gotten to focus on the teaching side, the true like being
Yes.
pedagogically sound in how we are delivering information and facilitating experiences for students. The further down that road we've gone, the more we realize, I think, they're capable of doing more than just intaking information and replicating it.
Yep.
And the military drill activity is copy me, do as I do, or here's the talk through, here's the walkthrough. My demonstrators will now become my assistant instructors, and you will do until by the numbers until you learn what it feels like, and you can't do it any other way. But I think as we've gotten more on the teaching side, and this is kind of, probably another topic for a different podcast, is the students are not being asked to mold themselves into soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines.
No.
Not at the high, like, not if that thing taking information and replicating it. So, for example, we had to counsel the school that we were working with just today on this. I think a traditional way to correct something is to physically manipulate the student to fix it. So, for example, students' feet are not at 45-degree angle. You walk up and you put your foot in between and you move it until it's at the 45-degree angle. Students' right angle is not bisecting the head and shoulder at a 45-degree. You walk over and you move the barrel of the rifle into place. But I think that when we stop doing, because I think the practical outcome is we don't do that except as a very last resort.
Like, you literally are like, look at your feet. What angle are they at? And they're like, and they'll look at you and be like, I really don't know. And you're like, okay.
Okay, so now we can do physical correction. But then there's a follow along of, do you see the difference? Put them back where they were. You see what that looks like?
Yep.
Put them where they are now. See what that looks like? Okay, we can differentiate the difference. Okay, but there's a difference between using it as a last resort and a tool versus the military drill thing of, we're just going to physically fix you, and then you're going to stand there until your body somehow decides to remember it.
Magically remembers it.
Which is not a thing.
I mean, the point of drill in the military is order and discipline, right?
It's instant willing obedience to orders, respect for authority, self-reliance, and teamwork, right? Because you might be commanded to run into a battlefield someday.
Whereas, and again, this is, I think, a topic for another podcast, is, drill at the high school level is performative, right? The activity is performative versus functional. And so therefore, the training methods, or the teaching methods in our case, don't need to be that of the military.
Well, that is like what I wrote. I wrote something down. I said the point of the activity is to hone the assumption that all students are capable and affirm the fact that they are free thinking and creative problem solvers. And every decision is run through that filter of, how does this grow the student? How does this make them a better free thinking, critically thinking person?
Well, I would say, because what we started with is, like, again, 5-6 years ago, it was just info dump on them because they're capable of intaking the information. But I think in just having this conversation is looking back, as we had a lot, like, the information we have now is not information that people told us, it's information that we discovered ourselves.
And that self-discovery process. Yeah. We are capable of self-discovery, therefore, why would a student not be capable of self-discovery?
And so I think what we've, especially in the past couple of months, have moved to is creating the framework to allow for us to guide them through the process of being able to discover some of these, like, core tenets of what it is that we're doing.
Because I think this is another thing I wrote. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's because the teaching has shifted from info dumping to instead giving you the tools to also kind of synthesize the information on your own. Now that you have the tools to actually go find that information, you know where to look for it. Because the assumption that you can only be info dumped on is that you will not also pursue further excellence in your own craft that you are spending all of this time on. And a lot of the teaching now is about, how can we better assist you in the act of actually being able to teach yourself and actively learn and synthesize on your own, versus just me telling you exactly how to make that information.
Well,
Go ahead.
I was going to say it's giving the ownership to the student of everything that the student is capable of doing. In other words, I think from this assumption, we ask the question, is the student capable of doing that? And if the answer is yes, then we don't do that thing when it comes to training. For example, is the student capable of understanding that their spin is out of cadence? Yes. Is the student capable of digesting and synthesizing why their spin is out of cadence? Yes. Okay, so let's create the situation for them to discover why it is. Instead of just telling them your spin is off time, here's how you fix it, which as a coach for me, I know in my early days, it was like your spin's off time. Now me, the expert, is going to tell you what you can do. Rather than, have you thought about this? Have you thought about how the push is affecting the rotational speed of your rifle? What happens if you push a little bit harder or a little bit softer? And then giving them a couple of reps to figure out what's happening, because as they self-discover, they will figure out how to clean the drill. And I think that, the phrase that I keep coming back to a lot is like, your students will clean the drill. You're not here to clean the drill, because what the students cannot do is they don't have the experience to set the structure in which you can clean your own drill. So you can spend your time cleaning the drill, sure, or you can take that same amount of effort and apply it to making a space for the student and them do what.
Teacher, and we this way over 10 years, is I think that's a hard thing to let go of like, well, they're not going to get as clean if I don't tell them how to do it. And it's letting that go of like, no. If you had the ability to get that good yourself, they also have the ability to get that good themselves. So let's give them the spaces. Yes, you can do it faster and you can do it more succinctly because you have all the years of knowledge you have to get them there and skip all their learning and discovery time and just get them there.
And I think that the outcome that we want to see, and part of maturing in being involved as a teacher in this activity, an educator in this activity, whatever you want to call it, clinician, coach, whatever, part of it is, at the end of the day, what is it that you want to see? Do you want to see 12 robots perfectly executing that exhibition routine?
With zero thoughts behind it.
You
with
want
the
to see
capability of only doing what it is they learned in their routine.
So when they leave the high school, they're like, yeah, I did this drill team thing. And it's like, okay, well, what did you learn? Well, I can do this routine really, really good. I did it for 4 years straight until it was perfect. Whereas I think that based on this assumption, I would want to see a student leave their drill team experience maybe a little bit less clean on the drill team front, but able, for example, to change their routine on a dime, because they have the processing tools and they have the systems and they know how to intake information and very quickly turn it around and apply it, because that is a skill. Not doing something over and over until you can't get it wrong. The ability to quickly synthesize and make adjustments is a skill that will support you for the rest of your life. And I think that when you're young in the coaching practice, I know for me, it was like drill.
Also, it's much about the drill.
Yep. It absolutely is.
But I think that, like, for us, and I think it took a long time to get there and a lot of experience to get there, because we always tell the students is like, we don't consider winning the drill meet. If we come home with the big trophy, that doesn't necessarily mean we won the drill meet for us, right? For us, winning a drill meet is, are we the most organized? Are we the most polite?
Best sportsmanship, least amount of forgotten items, most efficient, had people talking about, when you walk through the room, people are talking about you in both a positive way and also kind of there's the buzz about how you're conducting yourself.
So I think likewise, I think the training has shifted over time of like, it used to be when we leave at the 3 days, are they markedly better? Can they execute well? Did they get better skill wise, basically?
Was the visual and audio output greater than when we walked in? And I think when you start to really lean into this assumption that the students are free thinking and they can problem solve their own thing, you can trust that if you get them to be passionate and give them systems that they can follow, they will surprise you and you'll come back and you'll be like, wow, I didn't even know you could get that good.
Well, and I think that's why for us, I think success for like us being, I think to consider somewhere that we've been for 3 days successful is, when we leave, are the students capable of asking like intelligent and like thoughtful, mature questions?
Yes. I was actually just about to say that. I think the end result now is the drill better. It's can they ask questions about the drill?
Let me pull up the thing, because I literally, this happened. This is a perfect example. I'm about real life examples. So we're at the school in California, a longtime client, and we're working on Mark. What are we working on?
About face?
No, it was it was mark time. And a little female cadet walks up, one of the unarmed group leaders for the group work, and she says, "You know what? I need to ask a question. Okay, what do you got?" She goes, "I noticed that some people in my group are placing their toes on the ground when they mark time. Should it be our platform instead?" And we're like, I don't even know that I would think to ask that question or point that in piece of information out. I would never have told them, like, differentiate between your toes 3 microns away from the platform of your foot. But they got there. They got there. I didn't even think to give them that information, and they wanted to know more information. And so we tell them, well, what the manual says, the ball of the foot, that implies the platform. So if they're going on their toes in the front of their shoe, yeah, we should be on our platform.
Well, and I think by the end it was not should they say words, it was what words should they say.
We were doing change step march, and one of the group leaders came up and said, just for reference, what words should we have them say as they perform change step? We're like, we didn't even think to give you that information. And so the funniest thing is, like, we could have all the information in the world, but when you give the right structure and the right space, they will tell you what information they crave. And that is so much more meaningful because they want to know it. They sought it out. Versus,
and they're the ones physically doing it.
Yes.
So, like, what things come out of it? Well, we always give them the space to make the corrections first and provide that supplementary information. I think drill about getting rid of schools. Drill that's the activity. The whole point is that it's supposed to be perfect, right? But the challenge with that is that you, one, assume that the student has no idea when they've made a mistake, or two, you assume that they do know when they've made a mistake. And when we point out the mistakes right away, we do a rep, this was off, this needs to be better, this was out of time. We assume that student didn't already know that. But when you change it and you train in a manner, you teach in a manner that assumes that the student knows when they made a mistake, you're going to wind up with 2 types of students that actually are still making mistakes. One is they don't know that they're making a mistake. And one is that they know they're making a mistake and they are uncaring or unwilling to do anything about it.
What's the third? Or they're unable to because they're not maybe physically.
Yeah, there may be a physical deficiency that causes them to not. Well, the physical deficiency issue, that's a totally different thing. But honestly, the not caring to fix it and the not knowing both get the same approach, which is you must, at this point, not have enough information. And so I'd like to give you more information because you will fix this on your own, versus calling out ticks and calling out mistakes in a routine. Is asking questions. Do you know what your rifle angle is right now? Do you know where your feet are? Oh yeah, I totally know. I don't have to say anything else to you. You know.
I think it also gives you the framework where the students start to trust you. And so, like, you can go to a leader, they run a rep, they don't make a correction that you saw, so you can pull them to rear and say, hey, watch this. Okay, they do the rep. Okay, what did you see? I don't know. Okay, well, go through some things. Tell me what you saw. You didn't see anything. Okay, let's try it again. Look maybe closer here. And now you can also start to develop a relationship with the students where they start to seek out the adults of, like, and start to not be resentful of, like, oh, this adult is just coming in and micromanaging me, or here they come and now we're gonna have to stop doing what we're doing and make space for this random adult.
Yeah, we need to stop doing what we're doing to make space for the adult.
But it starts to create a way where there can be an actual partnership where they can actually learn from the adults, but the adults can still give them the space to mature themselves.
And in that space, you're still setting healthy boundaries. Like, it doesn't make you,
because it's well, in that case, it's about empowering the student to feel like they do, like you said at the very beginning, have ownership in what they're doing and in the activity that they are spending hours of their life on. And unlike any other sport, there's no financial compensation at the end of this, bar maybe you go into the military. But there are not endless scholarships to all these prime universities for all these different activities. So if you don't get financial compensation for getting good at this, why can't you get actual real life skills and true understanding of how to constantly improve and look for improvements from other things in life? Like, if you only just teach people using drill as the mechanism to completely follow orders, never figure anything out for themselves, you are setting them up for failure when they go to graduate, because they've been taught the entire time they weren't capable, instead of empowered to believe that they are, and that they can do things and they can figure this out, and how to trust the adults around them to continue to help provide the information they need to get better, rather than assuming that they're dumb kids that won't ever figure anything out.
Well, on that note, as we pull up to the Sonic to get slushies after training, I think that says it all. And the bottom line is, military drill in the military is designed and is under the assumption that you know nothing until we tell you what you need to know, and we will break you down and rebuild you as a soldier, sailor, airman, or marine, or guardian now. Whereas in a high school activity, we're assuming the very opposite, that you're already capable, that you're already free thinking. And so, said, we have to actively, and I think this is important as teachers, and this is like the most practical takeaway, we have to actively stop or disrupt the tendency of this activity because of its roots, because of what drill is. If you're not active about making it about the children being capable, it will always revert. You are the recruits and you know nothing, and I am here to instruct you.
We can't go from the normal adult tendencies of the students are going to lie to you, the students are not capable of being responsible for themselves. They're not going the students are just going to put on a good face for you, and then as soon as you leave them alone, they're going to do whatever the heck they were going to do anyway.
And it's like, have you ever stopped to think that maybe they're lying to you because they think they already think that they know that you think they're a liar, so when they lie, they're just being what it is that you already think, right? When they don't perform well, they're lazy, you already think they're lazy. Why in the world would they give more effort? Versus, and this is 100% I think of our experiences, when you think that they are wonderful and capable, magically they became wonderful and just amazing.
Students are not stupid. If you think, and maybe just because we're also this way, if I know that you think that I'm stupid or disrespectful, watch me. I will show you right? If you think that I'm a liar, well, you just watch this and we'll see what happens here. Is like, students are not dumb. The world is a combative place. If you assume as adults, which we have to be careful, these negative things, the students will pick up, and students are not in a place where they're just going to now meekly put their heads down. They're going to do something.
Also, yes. And it's not just that they're going to do something about it, but in this case, it's like, why would they put in the extra effort to change your mind? What extra space in the world these days do they have for the extra effort it would take to convince you, the adult, that they are worth something? Why wouldn't they dedicate that energy to other things and just give you what you already thought about them?
And as we wind down here, but we know this because we've encouraged students before to, hey, you should really talk to your instructor. Well, you know what? I don't know if I want to do that, because I don't want to go in there and just be told, well, I'm stupid, and, basically embarrass myself for having these thoughts. Basically be told that I'm a stupid kid who shouldn't have these feelings. So I just think that as we go forward, is we've seen the opposite work too, is if you go in because students are smart and they can genuinely see that you think they're smart and you think they're capable, and it's okay for them to try things and not be perfect. When you create that environment, they love that and they thrive in that. And I think we've seen that over the past few months, especially in the system that we're using.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, we could. I remember when I said maybe we could go for 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Clearly, we could keep. I mean, we could talk about a lot of things. We could talk about how if you assume that they're wonderful and they're going to achieve it, then don't choreograph exhibition drill that can be cleaned in a month, because that doesn't tell them that they're capable of achieving this crazy thing, right? Like,
don't give away our later podcast topics, Matthew.
No, well, I just to give one more part of a tangible example, right? I think that there's a tendency to want to win the competition. So if you think that the goal is to win the competition, then you choreograph things that are achievable in a short amount of time, because clean is the ultimate, the ultimate thing that we want in this activity. But if you thought that the student was capable, you would choreograph slightly above their ability, knowing that they're going to be able to reach up and touch it. And as soon as they touch it, you don't keep it there and clean it. You make it more difficult, and you keep raising the bar. Now, are we ever going to get absolutely nonsensically clean drill that way? No. But if the goal was never to have nonsensically clean drill, but instead to challenge the performers to achieve things that they never thought possible, and then the inverse is true too. Like, we don't water segments down when they're not achieving them. That's one of the things that a lot of people do, right? They water it down and make it easier to achieve. We will do a lot of things before we water a sequence down. We'll put a check pattern in. We'll lower the cadence threshold so they don't have to perform it as fast. We will bookend it with sequences that they already know. We will take out a sequence and just rewrite a brand new sequence before we take a sequence and water it down. And the reason that I would do that, the reason I would rewrite a new sequence before I watered it down, is because the moment you take out the fire hose and you say, we're going to do this, but take out all the aerials, you have just told them, listen, I don't think you're capable of performing that sequence the way that I wanted it to be done.
Well, I think that goes back, though, to the adult fear, of basically the students of chaos, of, letting their self-esteem is going to take a hit, of, doing all these things to either cushion the ego of the students, or having a fear of, chaos, or, wasting time. I think that goes back to the base assumption of students being incapable of, also, incapable of working over time towards something, of, oh, they're not going to get it right now, so lose motivation, so they're not going to stick on the team if it's too hard. And there's a level of truth about that, of, you do want to make it achievable.
You go one click above what you think is achievable at this moment right now. I don't think I choreograph when we sit down to choreograph. I don't think I choreograph for the team that exists in September. I'm trying to choreograph for the team that they will be in April or May. And we're trying
and then you just
hit that.
explain that. Right.
Yes, because they're intelligent and they understand.
Exactly. All it takes is literally telling them, hey, I am going to give you something that is above the level we're at now, because otherwise you're going to get bored. And I want you to know you can do this.
Yeah, I don't expect you to achieve now. I expect you to achieve by April. Don't be afraid in September when it's not spot clean, right?
Yep.
So there's all these practical things that come out of this. But I think that rather than list every single one of them, just like we were talking about, anyone who's listening to this should be able to put the lens over their glasses of every child is smart and capable. And what decisions would you make differently if the assumption was that they would figure it out? If the assumption was that even though they have a history of lying to other adults, that they weren't going to lie to you. That even if everyone else has told you this cadet is a problem, that you're going to look at that and say, I bet you're not a problem for me.
And I think we can close out probably on this. I think that's a really good point to kind of end this with.
Instructors love to talk about this. You know how many times we've gone to schools and they're like, watch out for so-and-so, they're a problem. I have issues with them.
And then we'll get to the end and they'll point them out and be like, yeah, so, is everything, and we're like, that person's your problem?
That's like your most valuable
They were the best cadet. Right. Always. Literally always. You're like, wait, they were so invested and involved and had the best conversations and the best eyes because they clearly cared. What do you mean they were your problem?
Now, just as a disclaimer, that's not to say there aren't students who maybe, if you're a teacher or instructor, that maybe you need to go to administration about. That's not to say that there aren't students that you maybe might not be able to reach.
I mean, it's a safety issue, it's a harassment issue, if it's a threatening,
But by and large, those people are in the very small minority.
Most of the problem children are, or the instructors aren't happy that they're free thinking, and then they run headlong ahead of them and make decisions and seem to be doing it for themselves or whatever weird excuse they can come up with. As it turns out, that's not administrative malicious behavior. Those are the ones that usually it's like, holy cow, they were wonderful.
Maybe you just need to have a conversation and set your parameters better and help set clear boundaries, because that's also a life skill. Different podcast probably, but like students, yeah. I think we have by and large,
we could talk for days on that.
We have very, very rarely found a student who couldn't be worked with, who wasn't capable, even when the instructors came in and said, watch out for all of these things. The amount of times we've walked out and been like, wow, I didn't know that they were smart.
We started at 3:07, so technically speaking, we're not at our mark. So I would just add to that. That one of the most practical outcomes, and this coaches and teachers, adults need to guard themselves actively, because the tendency in this world is to complain about the things that we want to complain about because it's an issue. But I was a young teacher, and I was told in college, Matt, when you get a job, never go into the teachers' lounges. And I said, why wouldn't you not go into that? Isn't that where you go to like make your copies? They go in there to make your copies, but don't eat your lunch in the teacher's lounge. Eat your lunch in your classroom. And I was like, okay, well, what's the deal with that? And they said, it's toxic. And if you get sucked into it, it will be very hard to come out of it. And I thought, surely not. All these people, I was a bleeding heart, young, naive idiot. I just want to help children. But you go in, because teaching is a hard career, and students are tough. And not everyone.
Well, parents are tough.
Parents are tough, and administrators are tough. But you
say the
walk in,
world right now.
and what you hear come out of these adults' mouths, oh, do you have so and so? They're so, and you hear terrible things, like we're throwing the R word around, and we're like demeaning these students, and you're like, are you talking about Johnny? Because he's wonderful for me. And they're like, oh, well, you're young, so they think, he thinks you're cool or whatever. It's like, or I don't sit around in the teacher's lounge calling him names on my lunch break because I'm frustrated with my own job. And I think the biggest organizational in our leadership change is not talk about the students and sit around. If we have a bad training day, and you have a bad training day as a coach,
then we go back to the drawing board and we figure out, okay, what can we do so they don't feel like they have to act that way?
It's never the students' fault, and we certainly don't sit around and talk and complain about this kid was so bad, I can't believe he didn't pay attention. What a screw around
And that's
idiot.
not to say that maybe that student didn't do something, but it's probably not that student's fault. But you don't know what,
Or you don't know why.
That's all different.
Yep.
is they may have done it, but there is almost always a reason behind why they did that goes beyond them, where you can always make your training or teaching environment a place where they don't feel like that they need to react however they reacted.
And again, it's such a, the world tells you that this is how we act and this is how we talk about people, and it's easy to slip into with your friends, and it's easy to slip into with other coaches. But I would say one of the things that we very practically just don't do to guard this assumption and keep it at the forefront of our hearts and minds. I feel like I'm at church. To safeguard our hearts and minds, and the idea that kids are not stupid, is we can't let ourselves slip into that talk, because as soon as we start to talk about it, eventually we may believe it. And as soon as we believe it, we're back to kicking people's feet open at 45. We're back to giving them achievable sequencing. We're back to physically moving their arm instead of letting them figure out that their arm isn't 45 degrees in the exhibition or whatever. We're right back to where we started, because we forget that the reason that we're doing all these things is because they'll figure it out themselves.
Now, last thing as we close out here.
No, I have one last thing after your last thing.
Maybe you should go first then.
Okay, my thing with that is kind of in talking about the have the heart check kind of moment to not maybe fall prey to those things, is I think a lot of that stems, and I mean I'm just thinking about recent experiences where a training was really difficult for me to find the engagement from cadets, and all it took was having a simple conversation with those cadets, like they were real people, saying, hey guys, I noticed things were not feeling as great as I was hoping they were going to. What's going on? And then the feedback they gave was incredibly intuitive and very self-aware. And they explained the things they were struggling with. And then literally the very next 30 minutes later, the very next training segment, I mean, it was a night and day difference because all it took was an adult simply saying, I clearly messed up somewhere. I did not provide enough of something for y'all. What can I do to make this better for you? And all of a sudden, every bit of information is getting absorbed, being applied, and all it took was one moment of telling them they actually mattered and I valued what they thought about themselves and the experience. And it changed the course of the entire training. And it's like, that's kind of what all of this is about, is how do you reconcile that sometimes? Because occasionally you're going to get in front of yourself, and a simple sentence can change the entire tenor of everything. And it would have been so easy to just be like, oh, well, the kids sucked. And it's like, okay, well, sure. But what was the reason? Why were they not connecting to what was being taught? And I think that's a really cool progression to see actually play out. And just like thinking about this conversation and different kind of recent training events, different processes we've gone through, is I think as adults, we are often afraid to question our own ability sometimes, because if it's not exactly perfect, it must not be myself, the expert, that didn't deliver. It must be an error on the child's part. And I think that's scary sometimes. But the cadets you talk to, the younger individuals, they don't look down on you for those moments. It in fact shows them you're a real person too, and that's an open and organic process, and they don't feel belittled after the fact. And I
Well, and
don't
then
think enough people are willing to try that because it's scary and it feels bad and you feel like you're failing in the moment.
Well, and then when you go and ask them to maybe do the thing but do it better and here's some information to do it, then they like run forth and they become better than you thought they were going to become anyway, right? So like it ends up paying off in that way on the drill floor, even though it's not a drill floor thing traditionally.
Okay.
Yep.
My final thing. If you do this, if you make the assumption that students are capable and free thinking and have the ability to grow and learn if you give them the space, you have to be ready for what that creates.
Yes.
Because there's a couple of things. On the easy thing is you have to be ready if you are able to develop this relationship with the students. You have to be ready for them to question you.
Because they will, because you've empowered them with the right words and terminology to feel like they can ask a question.
So you have to be ready to give them the right answer and then go, well, why is that the right answer? Or, to be honest, I don't really know. I feel like that maybe is counterintuitive. And you have to be ready to have that conversation. If you give them the ability to free think, is you have to then be able to set the boundaries and basically help them know when is the right time and the wrong time to maybe do that. But you have to be ready to have those conversations and actually explain why you're asking them to do what you're doing, or explain why you're telling them to do that, because they may question that. That's one thing.
That's probably the
Well, and
easiest
that's not questioning you to make you feel lesser. That's now genuine curiosity, and you have to safeguard yourself from feeling defensive over it, because now it's not.
You can't choose to go back
The
to being the
immediate is
adult.
defensive.
Yeah,
Right.
you can't go back to I'm the adult because I said so after you've opened the door to them exploring what's out there.
Because
So
it's not a disrespect thing. It is a
Correct.
respect thing, in all honesty.
Yes. Because they feel safe enough that they can do that.
Exactly.
The second thing, when you, as an adult, treat them like they're not stupid and like they're people and they start to feel safe with you, is you need to make sure you know whatever mandated reporter protocols or whatever. If you're a teacher, if you're a coach regularly, or you're just there as a consultant, you need to know what the procedure is for when a student tells you something.
Because they will open up and they will, and we're talking like in 3 days, this can be, I'll never forget, we were in South Carolina and we've always had this kind of philosophy about it. And the student comes up to us afterwards, thank you for the training, it was so helpful, I feel so much better about drill team now. And then she tells us that, I won't go into the details, she tells us this horror story, literal horror story.
And if we could pray with her.
So we said, of course, and we're in the corner of the gym where everyone is, so it's not weird. But then we get a message on the Instagram. It was about a week later, we were at the next training site, and the message comes through. It's like, and it basically implies that she's thinking about self-harm, right? So she felt safe enough to tell us how she was feeling. Well, you have to know in that moment what to do. You have to know that gets screenshot and sent to the instructor. And I called the instructor, the master sergeant, right away, said, hey, listen, your cadet just sent us this message. I'm about to text it to you. You need to know about this because we think her safety is in danger. Correct. If you open this door and don't know what to do, and a kid tells you that they are experiencing this thing in their life,
or they've got something going on at home and it's a thing that you need to tell someone else who's responsible for them,
you cannot sit on that information, because the most important adult thing you can do is be the adult and elevate it the proper way. Which, if you're listening to this, at least on the initial round, the Coaches Network stuff covers how to deal with that.
Third thing. If you do this and you treat them well, because not many adults do, they are highly likely, not saying they will, that they may start to seek out your time and your attention because they feel good about it at work. They're students, and they can develop feelings in that. If you have to make sure, as that student maybe wants more things or wants to talk to you more, that you are setting up safeguards for yourself, like not having one-on-one conversations with them, not being alone with them, not being in a room and closing the door. But likewise, if it's, in any type of like media, so like text or messages, ideally you're not doing that one-on-one ever. No, you will never, ever, 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 should you ever be messaging a student one-on-one. Period. Is you need to make sure that that's through proper channels of communication, that the adult who is responsible for them knows about, that there's multiple people involved in that conversation. Is you have to guard yourself, and also, make sure it's not too late at night. Make sure it's not at all times.
Yeah. I'll give you an example. We have the Leaders Network within the Coaches Network sits next to the Leaders Network, and the adults in the Coaches Network can't see the Leaders Network. There's a cutoff time for communication. After X time, we will not respond to a message. We'll pick it up the next day. And it's making sure that when you open that space, you are still what can a kid do and what can an adult do? A kid can ask great questions and be capable. An adult can set boundaries, right? The kid can't set the boundaries. The adult must set the boundaries.
So you just have to make sure, because the third thing is, it's highly likely that you are going to develop a closer than just acquaintance relationship with these students, because they're going to trust you and they're going to want your guidance. So you have to make sure that you're communicating properly with them and keeping both of you in a situation where everyone is safe, and basically that student doesn't get put in a really bad position because you just didn't think about it, and 3 months down the road, oh no, how did I get here?
Yep, absolutely.
Well, and if you assume that students are wonderful, amazing human beings who are capable of a lot of things,
you're going to like them.
You as an adult must make every effort to affirm that through how you interact as an adult, and to show them what it means to be a healthy adult, and so that they never forget that though it is a safe space, that though it is, that you will always have answers and insight to give them.
But it'll be during certain times, within a certain way of communicating, in certain environments.
It has guardrails.
Correct. The guardrails are there, and that they know, and you assume that if you set those guardrails very clearly, the student will understand and follow them, but you are continuing to do your due diligence. Yeah, I think that's probably the point to end on, which is you got to cover your butt. That's the most important thing.
Because if you do this and give them the space, they will start to form an attachment and a relationship with you. It's not possible for them not to, because you may be one of the only adults in their life who gives them the space and treats them this way.
And so that's the actual censure. You may be the only adult that's treating them like a real person.
That's pretty powerful if you stop and think about it.
So you just have to make sure you're protecting yourself and protecting them when we do this. And again, there's stuff in the Coaches Network. And as we're always a resource and can talk about how to set that up safely. But that's got to be the most thing at the end of the day, is if you're going to do this and open this door, you better be ready to handle what that entails. You can't just do this without thinking about it. It is a choice and a responsibility that if you choose to do this, you are now going to be responsible for the young people who you're teaching.
Which is also why, even if you really, really enjoy it, if you're not ready and willing to acknowledge the impact that you can and will have on a student's life, then maybe you should consider whether or not you should be around students. versus just doing it as your own personal hobby as an adult.
Pretty much. Well, and on that note, we have hit it almost exactly on time, and obviously we could keep going, but we have concluded today's car ride. Make sure that if you have questions, wherever it is that you can make a comment, leave a comment, help feed the algorithm. I have no idea whether this will wind up anywhere on stuff for public consumption, but if it does, throw us a like. It helps the algorithm. Share social media platforms at Building Dynamics. And thank you for joining us on this episode of Car Convos with DTD.